exactly what he had projected 18 years prior. And that organization still exists today. Morehouse College is alma mater, although rather ironically, it was scheduled to go to Spelman, but one of the last official acts of the president before Janetta Cole was to say, we don't need a public health institute at Spelman. And the contingent staff that was to support it switched schools from Spelman to Morehouse, the primary person being Bill Jenkins' first wife, Cynthia Brown Jenkins, who became the first director of the Public Health Sciences Institute. In 1992, I became the second director.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are.
And then the third director was Cynthia Traeger, right?
I believe she was the third director.
Did she come in right after you? Or
she was already there. First of all, she was a mentee of Cynthia Brown Jenkins, because she had been her student at Spelman. She had taken the project. She had done Project Imhotep. She'd actually done it, and she was in a position to lead the organization after I left, and so
she became the third.
She became the third director, and the rest is history, as they say.
So, kind of go back at the ASA for a minute.
Yes.
So, 1970, you went to the session on minority health statistics. I sent you that newsletter that Bill had written for, it was the SAFI newsletter,
yes.
SAAPHI, in which he said that there was one African American presenter, I think.
Okay, and I don't remember that at all.
And he may have gotten it wrong. I mean, it's possible.
I think maybe we should research it.
I would like to be.
There was another important effort that both Bill and I participated in, and it was the ASA Committee on Minorities, which was an effort to implement at the professional level supports for bringing more minorities into the profession.
When did that start? Do you remember?
I only remember that it was in the 70s, and I remember attending various meetings. That I remember that the executive director of ASA was Fred Leone, and that there were a number of us that were on that committee, including, I'm almost sure, Camilla Brooks.
And does the name Gladys Reynolds ring a bell?
Yes, I remember Gladys Reynolds quite well, and I remember that she worked at CDC, was affiliated with Bill, and they were quite a team.
And she was a key person at ASA. Is that
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so ASA, and then so what did you do? So it's not what you did after ASA, because you were at NICHD all this time.
Yes, I was in NICHD from 69 to 81.
81.
Involved in a number of activities. I taught statistics through the Upper Mobility College.
Where is that? Is that?
The Upper Mobility College was implemented through the federal structure. It was part of what was then Federal City College that became the University of the District of Columbia.
Oh.
But through affirmative action initiatives, they provided a link for non-degree federal staffers to have an avenue to get degrees. And it was done through there. I taught math, I taught calculus, and I also taught statistics. And during that time, another link that we hadn't talked as much about at UNC was that my advisor, who sadly I'm not remembering his name, but he got his doctorate from the University of Buffalo, why you know that, but he was also the advisor to Peter Nemeny. And Peter Nemeny was a postdoc at the math stat department, and he was never around. So I'd ask the chair, I'd ask my advisor, where's this guy Victor and Marion? I keep hearing about him. And finally he relented and said, well, he's kind of a postdoc in name only because he's in Mississippi working for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He was working as a community organizer. His background was he came from a progressive community in pre-Hitler Germany, moved from there, they were basically run out by Hitler, moved to England, and later moved to Black Mountain, North Carolina, and that group formed Black Mountain College, of which Peter was a graduate. And then he went to Princeton, studied with John Tukey and got a PhD, and was in '68 doing a postdoc at UNC. And he and I became two of the authors of the book Statistics from Scratch, a non-parametric approach to statistics.
Here, I'll turn this off.
He's wondering why I didn't come to the bidding bell, because he's the coordinator of it. And I told him I was coming.
Oh, yeah, mentioned to me.
Yes.
So the book that you co-authored was
Statistics from Scratch.
Statistics from
It's
Scratch.
a non-parametric approach to the concepts of statistics that I'm hoping that Dave Kleinbaum and I will work on pushing statistics from scratch down to the high school level.
Great.
Yes, that's one of my projects of now.
So I have maybe a few more minutes and then we have to close it down. You were at NICHD and then you left there in 1981.
I left there in 81, moved to Durham. I have to tell the story that all through the late 60s, all through the early 70s and late 70s, my father was saying to me, when are you coming back to Durham to help us redevelop Hillside? When are you coming back to Durham to help us redevelop Hillside? Hillside has been the target of a total demolition urban renewal project that wiped out over 125 businesses and 600 residents on a 70-acre tract of land through urban renewal. And all of that was removed. My father's business was there, service printing company, and was still standing as a, quote, relocatee, meaning they had sold the building to the city, but were looking for a place to relocate and never quite satisfied with what was offered. So it turns out that I came to NIHS April 1 of 81.
In Research Triangle Park.
Research Triangle Park. By October, a not-for-profit Hillside Development Corporation was organized that had its 501c3 status, that had generated a plan for the redevelopment of the area, and had gotten its first grant from the Mary DuBill Foundation via Mary Siemens, who was running the shop. And I launched it working full-time at CDC, but it's kind of
at NIHS.
I'm sorry, at NIEHS, and had a tacit agreement that I had done well when I was in Bethesda, and I was being paid quite handsomely, almost as much as my supervisor, and perhaps there wasn't a promotion in the offing, so we sort of made concessions for me to work on Hillside as long as I covered my responsibilities there. And $25 million of development occurred. Not the plan, the grand plan that we had thought, but a positive move forward. And we're still seeing the effects of that project, but often thinking that, oh, what might have been if we'd fully been able to implement what those plans were.
And you led the Hillside Development Corporation after
Yes, and it
NIHS.
took me over as a full-time venture. I became, in '85, I left NIHS and worked for the Hillside Development Corporation until about 1990.
And then you moved to Knoxville to do the same kind of work in Knoxville.
I became what's called an intermediary. I was the Center for Neighborhood Development, which supports with infrastructure community-based organizations like a Hillside Development around the city of Knoxville. And it was an initiative that had been set up through the mayor and others, particularly the community development director. That was quite an experience.
And you did that for 2 years?
For about 2 years.
And that was pretty far from being a mathematical statistician.
It was. So I had moved from my avocation to my vocation. And in a way, once I decided to leave there, particularly when the opportunity to be the director of the Public Health Sciences Institute came forward, it was an opportunity to return to my field, to return to a mechanism that could support the creation of biostatisticians, epidemiologists, and other public health scientists, and to sort of meet the mission of Bill Jenkins, which was, we need to create an infrastructure that brings more.
And Bill had something to do with your coming to be the director of PHSI?
He did. He told me about the position, although he was very savvy in the political process and knew that it needed to be Morehouse's choice, since they were the implementer. And I literally got hired before anybody knew I ever knew Bill, which said something about my credentials, but it also said something about his savviness to know what might have been. And there were, to put it mildly, politics on the CDC side, both in terms of the vehicle through which they implemented the cooperative agreement. It was the Office of Minority Affairs. And there was politics on the Morehouse side, who had their own ideas about how such initiatives need to be administered to benefit the college primarily.
Mm-hmm. So, and you did that for 2 years?
I did that for, yes, 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And then I was selected for the Extramural Associates program of NIH. And what they had done is, and in large part it was because I wanted to generate more money for public health sciences. And that did happen as a result. In fact, NIHS became one of the sponsors for a period. And there were other opportunities that warranted, but they had done a study that looked at minority and women institutions, those which seemed to compete favorably in the environment of the NIHs, the NSFs, the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, etc., and those that don't. And the ones who compete favorably were those who had comprehensive offices of sponsored research. And so I wrote an application to get funded to create the Office of Sponsored Programs and Research at the Morehouse College, and became its first director, transitioning from public health sciences and but providing support to public health through such environments as research careers for health disparities, which was funded at the $5 million level.
And that was the institute that Diane Rowley and Bill Jenkins
came to
work
Morehouse
to create.
Well, no, it was created prior to them coming, but once they retired, they joined it. And Bill was always the chair of the advisory board of public health sciences, always involved in the selection of the interns, always tracking them, always having a network, both at CDC and at the national level through American Statistical Association, American Public Health Association. So he was, let us say, diligent and vigilant in seeking opportunities and pushing them forward.
And so then after you left Morehouse, did you go to CDC, or am I making that up?
You are making that up. I went out to the CDC to visit Bill on occasion.
Close.
But after Morehouse, which ended about 2006 or 7, I did mainly consulting on a lot of projects, and some of which are still going. I provided support to 43, well it's now 44 doctoral candidates, where I was kind of their silent committee person, helped them with their design, helped them with their analysis of the data, helped them with showing that the
Doctoral
results
students
were
where?
all over. There were some at CDC, Ford Morehouse, the president and the of Voorhees College, people who were and this started not just at that point. It had started when I was back in NIH. And so one of the people who I helped get his doctorate was the EEO officer who did the Bill Cosby program, which is University of Massachusetts Amherst. So both Bill and Camille have doctorates from that program, and Ted Blakeney, who was another one of my son's godfathers, was able to get his doctorate there with some support.
And you did this kind of pro bono?
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes I would charge a bit for my effort, but mostly pro bono.
Wow.
And that's one of the things that's sort of ironic in that I'm ABD from George Washington University,